Recording started.
Hey, everybody, I want to welcome you to this week's Matrexit discussion group call for tactical sovereignty. Like I always say, this beautiful Sunday, the first day of the week, not the seventh, and also, therefore, not the Sabbath. One of the many things everybody's been kind of tricked on, fooled on, and that's probably what I'm going to go into a little bit this evening, because a lot of the things, the way things are set up, come with a set of rules. I kind of call them universal rules or rules of the universe. But we aren't taught these. Places you are taught these would be from avenues that people would steer you away from. I would say you'll find them with maybe like fortune telling or a tarot card, using those. Which I'm not big into the tarot cards, but I think there's a lot of those things that can be used to your advantage and should be used to your advantage. I think there's a lot of things that have been placed here for mankind. And who is it that really runs this world, this universe? I mean, Yeshua, when he was tempted on the mount, the adversary told him, I will give you all of this, this can all be yours. Did Yeshua argue with him about that and say, no, you can't? This belongs to my Father? No, he didn't argue with him a bit, because he knew that what he was being told was the truth. That this land is controlled, even today, by the great adversary. If that wasn't the case, then people would have no need to pray, or to seek, a holy intervention and help on different things. That wouldn't be a need at all if it was the creator that was the one totally in charge here. But he cast somebody else here, and then also decided to put us here at the same time, which can be a little bit confusing. But yeah, there's some basic rules that come along with it. Like I said, we are not really taught these. I think when we hear some of them, it's like, a light bulb kind of comes off in our head with automatically. Gosh, this makes sense, if you stop and think about it at all. And at the same time, a lot of these rules, in fact, most all of these universal rules, I would even go as far as to call them natural law. A lot of these also mirror themselves in the laws of man, in the codes and statutes of mankind. Mankind uses these things because they know that this is the way things are set up. This is the way things happen. I named tonight's call, the journey. And this is a journey. Everybody, your lifetime is a journey of a lifetime. I just wonder how many people realize they're on a journey. Do they really know they're on a journey? Are they doing anything about this journey? Because you have to know a lot of these universal laws in order really to make it in this journey and to be successful with this journey. And as far as successful goes, success is going to be determined on your goals and your plans, your desire, as far as what's being done with this journey. One of these number one universal rules, and I'm not going to go deep into all these because you can be here all night with these. I'm just going to hit some highlights, some of the basic ones that we need to comprehend foundationally. And number one is you want to receive. Everybody wants to receive, whether in Christianity it's receiving the gifts of the Spirit, or or in life you want to receive wealth, you want to receive happiness, your pursuit of happiness that's offered to you. The Declaration of Independence. There's so many little things like that everybody wants. They want to have a happy and a healthy family. They want their bodies to be healthy. There's a whole lot of want. People want to receive a lot of things. And this is the reason why a lot of people go into, like what I had mentioned before, whether it's tarot card reading or divining or fortune telling, because they're wanting to receive things. And I think it's interesting. I hear a lot of people that want to debunk things like that. They say, well, if a fortune teller, really can tell that it's happening tomorrow or a year from now, if they can really read into the future, then why don't they just give you the winning lotto numbers? And there's they giggle and laugh, and they think, yeah, they really figured it all out by saying that, but they don't understand these universal rules. And like I said, the number one rule is everyone wants to receive. But here's the problem. The problem with wanting to receive is that there's two sides to every coin. And if you want to receive, the first question should be, what have you given? Because you cannot receive, unless you have also given. It's got to be a balanced playing field. Everything's got to be even. It's just like your rights. Everybody demands their rights. Oh, I know my rights. But you don't even hear teachers talk about duty and responsibility that comes along with rights. If people claim to be able to, that they're, a teacher of the Constitution or a teacher of law or whatever, and when they get into rights and they never mention duty and responsibility, they don't know jack squat. Because if you study rights, everything that you will read on it legitimately, everything that you read, the word rights is also saddled with one of two words, duty or responsibility. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. You cannot get your weekly allowance from dad as a kid if you refuse to mow the lawn. It just doesn't work. Yeah, what's up, man?
That's I was just going to say that's earning your daily bread, and I explain this to people with the two parables. The parable of feeding a man for a day if you give him a fish, and you feed him for a lifetime if you teach him to fish. But the true principle is that once he has that teaching, you impel upon him that he now is a teacher himself. And therefore, the true gift is that he can turn around and teach others. Now, in the parables of the talents, it talks about going out with 5 talents, coming back with 10. You have to share those 5 talents so you can profit them by exchanging your knowledge in gain of another's knowledge. That's what it's truly is. That's what the true benefit is, in my opinion, is the knowledge that we gain from each other in our interactions. Not by warring against each other and blaming each other and saying, well, we're better than you, but actually teaching each other the best we can of everything we know. Now, when we take out and think about, you've got to invest in order to receive. You've got to, in order for you to give freely, or in order for you to freely give, you receive already freely. Everything is abundant. And therefore, that's your cup is already full. We're not supposed to want. So when we go out with one talent and we bury it, and we don't stress that the teaching of that talent, then we aren't going to get anything back. The scripture tells us that. And then the second thing is, you were saying about the codes and everything being just a set of guidelines that follow the basic principles of nature, which you and I know as the law of nations. Now, the scriptures, I look the same way. They're not law, okay? It strictly tells us in those scriptures that the law is just simply to love each other as ourselves. So I see the scriptures not as a law, but again, a set of principles that can guide us in our moral standings. And it tells us about all those different phases of our moral standings. And if you read those scriptures and get into the etymology of the words, there's a story that you would not believe that is exactly about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody could find a mirror example of their life displayed in some of the characters within the scripture. And what you said there also, it was a perfect example as far as the talents and investment. Even financially, people want to be successful financially. Okay, well, what are you doing? Are you sitting there staring at the mailbox all day waiting for your ship to come in? Or have you made some investments? What have you invested in? Because, you know, if you haven't set out a ship, on a journey to go out and reap the spoils from somewhere else or whatever, then you don't have a ship that's going to be coming in for you. So
Well, yeah,
you
not
have
only
to have
that,
an investment.
not only that, but if you go out in your first investment as a young shipper and you go out there on them seas and your boat gets beat up and you come back, you make it back to shore somehow, what then? See, this is the thing I tell people. I see too many young people today is ending their education at 18 when they graduate high school, and then they don't pick up another book. This is sad. We really need to encourage our younger generation to get into the information that's available to them. This internet is an amazing library. And if we just did our own research based on everything we hear, whether we question it or not, even if we go along with it, if we look at it to make sure that what we're going along with is reasonable and logic, then we should be good with it. But that's ever the more reason that if we do think we're doing good, and we are the ones that are trying to hold people up to be righteous, we should be righteous with ourselves and make sure that we're following up with our research. This is another point that I see a lot of people fail on, is that they do research and it was 6 years ago and they're still depending on that information today. You got to keep up with things as they change. That's what the whole thing about this world is. This is a world of change, and people don't want to change. That's what they get to, the convenience and the comforts and the lifestyle. You shouldn't have a lifestyle. You should have a life and live it stylishly.
Well, people don't want to change, and this is something I'm going to get into on this as well. But this comes along with the word repent. What does the word repent really mean, Keith?
Return, actually. You're
Yeah.
not you're not going to return to the bad ways. You're going to return to the way you were born, sanctified and ordained a prophet unto the nations, because he's the one that knew you before he formed you in the belly.
Yeah, but that means that if you're going to repent, that means you're going to have to change. There's some changes that have to be made. It just doesn't mean saying I'm sorry and then still continuing on the same path that you're on. It just doesn't work that way.
You know, I don't tell people much about my son, but I had a son that was born and died 6 months later of SIDS. And when my son died, I'd already had a tumultuous life in my young 18 to 25-year age. In the first 7 years of my adult life, I had prison time, criminal convictions otherwise, and and just kept going. And so I really gave up. And I've always been a spiritual man all my life. But at that point in my life, I gave up on my father in heaven. I said, fuck you to him. And I decided I was going to live my own life and I was going to do it my way. And I ended up getting involved in testing a lot of different drugs and stuff. And thank God I never stuck to anything. I got involved in meth for a while back in Nebraska, but I was able to recognize it enough that I had to get away from it. So I came back to Iowa. But the main thing is that the only way that I could turn around and return to him after I'd already said, fuck him, you took my son. There's no reason to take my son. You already took your son. Why are you 6 months old? And there was one card I got from the funeral, and I can't remember who it was from, but I remember distinctly that she says, sometimes when we ask why, there really is no other answer other than he has already served God's purpose. And so that's what I turned back to, is God's purpose. God's purpose, like I said, is to owe no man anything but to love one another. For that is to fulfill the law. And that's when I realized all my life I've been this angry guy because I'm the one that was chasing around trying to figure out how to put my family back together after I was thrown in foster homes. And then once I realized I was adopted, I couldn't put that family back together. I tried to make the adoptive family work the best I could. That didn't work. So I still had to figure out how to make my own family. That got screwed up too, as you know. So I became a very angry young man. And that's why I'm so passionate today. It's not because I'm angry now. It's because I've already been through the anger, and it saddens me today.
Yep. All right. Well, I hit rule number one with the kind of rules of the universe is people wanting to receive, but you have to learn that you have to give in order to receive. Number two is something that's really big in various movements today is you want to ascend, or people say you need to raise your vibration. Somebody asked me one time, if I've ever raised my vibration, and I told him, yeah. I said, one time I raised my vibration so high I became invisible. Everybody was bumping into me, and it wasn't very comfortable. Just it's kind of choking around. But number one was you want to receive, but you haven't given. Number two is you want to ascend. Well, there's a problem with ascending, and in Christianity, it may be called being born again. It's called different things and different teachings. But if you want to ascend, you can't ascend if you have anchors holding you down. Especially anger. A lot of pain and anger people hold on to is some of those anchors that are keeping you from ascending and being, the type of individual you should really be.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm so blessed about is because when I came out of that anger, and I stress this to everybody, you got to get under your own turmoil, because that's when I recognized the Jacob's ladder in my own self. I realized I was fighting myself. Ain't no fight in this world but with yourself. And Sun Tzu in The Art of War says to defeat one's opponent without fighting is of supreme excellence. So quit fighting yourself. You're only beating yourself up.
Yep. And that gets on to part B of that second law of ascension. The first one being you're holding on to pain and anger. Excuse me. But part B, and is probably as important, if not maybe even more, is you won't forgive. People won't forgive, and if you're not forgiving, that's a huge anchor that's going to keep you freaking tied down to whatever pain and anger or misery that you're in. And people don't understand really what forgiveness is all about, because there should be a big clue in the fact that it's going to hold you down and keep you from any type of ascension that you want to make. And that is that forgiveness isn't for you.
Right. Forgiveness is for others.
Exactly. That's what you're told, right?
Others. We're supposed to forgive others because we're not supposed to judge them. That's his job. Well, his job is vengeance. So we're not supposed to judge them. We're not supposed to wreak vengeance on them. We're supposed to bless them and forgive them.
Right. Well, I have a bit of an issue with this teaching that's given to us. That this forgiveness is for others, and we need to learn how to forgive them. And the problem with this really is that if you say somebody harmed you 2-3 years ago, and in your heart you have forgiven them, well, that's good for you, but what does it do for the person that harmed you or that did wrong to you several years ago? They don't know that you've forgiven them in your heart, and it frankly doesn't mean jack squat to them that you forgave them in your heart or not. They could probably care less. That's why I have a problem with that manner of teaching when it comes to forgiveness, because forgiveness really isn't for others. It's not for others at all. It doesn't do anything for them. It's about you. Yeah. It affects you. And the biggest thing that people need to learn how to forgive, that I think the biggest anchor that holds people down, is their inability to forgive themselves for things that they've done that maybe has been long forgotten and maybe even nobody ever even knew about. but they haven't forgiven themselves for it, and they haven't learned how to do that. And that's what it comes down to when it's talking about loving others like you as you love yourself. Well, the problem is that there's very little teachings that tell you how to love yourself. Well, if you don't know how to love yourself, you don't know how to forgive yourself, you don't know how to ascend with yourself inwardly, then how's this going to affect anybody on the outside? You got
Yeah.
to realize that this forgiveness is really for you. It's not for others. Hey, I was reading a book from a psychologist a number of years ago, and he was talking about people, for instance, and they're not really around anymore, but people that have been in insane asylums. And nowadays, I wouldn't say we've got people in insane asylums. Instead, today we have people on a plethora of medications. And so I would draw a comparison between those two. But this doctor was saying that the majority of people that were in insane asylums wouldn't be there. He said upwards of 95% of them would not be there if they knew how to forgive. And it wasn't necessarily about the forgiveness of others, it's the forgiveness of yourself, because it's not the not being able to forgive yourself that eats away at you, that
Yeah.
that tears at your soul all day long when you wake
Well,
up in the morning or at night when you lay down to go to bed. All of those memories of those things that are eating you up keep circulating through your head, and next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. and you still haven't gone to sleep yet. It's because you haven't learned how to forgive yourself. That is a huge universal rule right there. Did you have something, Keith?
well, yeah. I was going to say you're actually right, because I did say it was for others, but I think that's more the way it it is
That's
effectual
what
today, is that it's for other people, and that's why we don't see people forgiving themselves like you were explaining, because what happens is over time when people there was a time when if you did something against somebody and it wasn't anything major, but like say you broke his window out playing baseball, and it was fair to say that okay, maybe you ought to mow his lawn a few times to earn the money so you can go down to the hardware store and buy him a new window. That was the forgiveness act. That it worked for both parties. That was forgive me as I forgive our debtors. And that's the concept of that. Oh no, man, anything but to love one another, because that's our true duty, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And that's the true sense of forgiveness, is knowing we're not perfect. So no matter what situation somebody else is in, you've got to keep such an open mind to know that there are elements you don't know about what's gone on in his life or her life that brought him to that point. So you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes at that point in life and give yourself an excuse to forgive yourself. So you can, see it in a proper sense of forgiveness. That's why I say, I see a lot of these public servants nowadays, how, back in my younger days, I was blatant. I was gonna assume they're just stupid. Well, come to find out, I've been pretty stupid all my life too. So now I've got to give them forbearance on it. I've got to give them that forgiveness, which is the same thing, forbearance. I've got to look forward to the possibility that, hey, maybe they went through worse shit than I did and just somehow climbed out of it better, but they're still cognitively dissonant. Maybe that higher education was just a dumber down, kept them smart enough to do the books, but not smart enough to realize what was really happening. And I think that's the big thing, is all this, like we were talking about earlier, the technology that's advanced so much has allowed people to think that they've learned to a certain degree about certain things, that they can do something and do it well, but they don't know the true aspect behind it. I can forgive people all I want, but to not know the real aspect behind it, is to forgive myself, is a very important aspect. And I think that's what people have lost.
Well, along with forgiveness, you always hear the saying, that somebody may forgive, but they'll never forget. Well,
Mhm.
if you haven't come to a point of forgetting, then you've not really done any forgiveness. Even if you've forgiven somebody else, but you're not going to forget, but what has it really done? Even if you claim that you've forgiven yourself, but you still can't forget the situation, what has it really done? What you have to do is you have to learn what it is that you're going to let own you,
Right.
because that's what really happens with the things that you don't forget, that you refuse to forget,
Yeah. You
is
don't bring up.
you let those things own you. They own your mind, and they control you, and they control your emotions. And so yeah, there's no ascending that's going to be done. There's no going to be raising a vibration or anything like that that's going to be done. And at the same time, that this even goes into health aspects. You hear people talk about raising your vibration. Well, how can you raise your vibration if you're still putting the vibration of dead things inside your body? If you're still putting the vibration of chemically created foods and substances and drinks into your body, how can you raise your vibration or ascend if you're still going to be putting medications or even things for entertainment into your body that have negative effects and have low vibration? It just doesn't work. And so people end up getting confused. Oh, I've been doing this for 6 months and nothing's changing. Well, okay, well, I'm sorry, but doing half an hour of yoga every morning for 6 months isn't going to do crap for you if you are still doing negative things and negative vibrational things to your body. It really should be easy for people to be able to see. So anyway, the rules of the universe we went over. Number one, people want to receive, but they don't want to give. Number two, people want to ascend, but they're still holding on to the pain and anger and lack of forgiveness that keeps them weighted down. And to me, one of the biggest rules of the universe that is not taught at any point through people's life is what I named tonight's episode, which is the journey. Because if you don't realize that you're on a journey and you've not prepared for it and haven't taken the steps that are required that come along with a journey, then where are you going to get to in life? You're just, at 80 years old, you're going to end up passing away pretty much in the same situation that you were born into, if nothing was done in regards to what a journey is all about. And number one, you got to realize first that this is a journey that you're on. And with any journey, you have to start out, if you want to know whether you've made any progress or not, is the starting point. Number one, you have to be able to realize the starting point that you're on, or whether it is a financial journey or a spiritual journey, whatever the case may be. You have to have your baseline set and know where you're starting at on this journey. That's number one. And it's why I tell people all the time, we have to realize who we really are, where we're really from, and where we're really at. Those go along with that step one of being on a journey, your starting point. And that starting point really takes some very serious self-analysis and a very honest self-analysis. That's part of that forgiveness of yourself. And that's one of the hardest things to even begin the journey that you have to do, is analyzing who and what and where you're at. Number two, with that journey, you would think would come at the very end of the steps, but it doesn't. It's number two. And that is the ending point, the destination. Because if you're going to start on a journey, you've got to have a marker set out in the future or out on the horizon. That's where I'm aimed at. That's it. That's the direction I'm going in. That's what my goal is. You have to have a goal set up. So you have to have that destination or goal put in place and put in your mind. That way, everything you do, if it doesn't keep you on the trail and on the same track, on the same path to that end goal, then you cut those things out of your existence. You eliminate those things. And that is highly, highly required on that journey. And you can't get sidetracked, squirrel. You can't get sidetracked by these shiny objects. You know what I mean? Number 3 would be, well, if you're on this journey, like I said, whether it's spiritual or wealth related or economic or saving a job, what you want to do in the future as far as your work goes, you have to take a look at your mode or your method of transport that's going to get you to that end goal, that destination that you want to arrive at. And so if you're looking at this method or the mode of transport that you're going to be using to get to your goal, then you have to look at, okay, well, what are the type of tools that you need? What are the type of tools that need to be used to achieve what you're trying to achieve? Like I said, this doesn't matter if it's spiritual, financial, no matter what it is. And so one was, what tools are being used? Another one would be, where are these tools available? Are these tools accessible? How do you make these tools accessible to yourself? To me, a big one, and a lot of people would push you away from this, but I think that this is a very strong one when it comes to your motor method, but is that, who has been on that path? Who do you know that has been on that path and it has reached that point in the journey that you are looking to attain? Find people who have done it, and look and see how they did it. Look and see what tools that they used, how they made those tools even available to them. What was their mode or method to gain that final destination that they wanted to arrive at. And at the same time, while you're doing that, you can also look at people and see people who had that destination in mind, but didn't attain it. And look at the things that kicked them off from the path, or got them to a point where they hit a fork in the road and they made the wrong turn. It's, to me, just as important to learn what not to do as it is to learn what to do. And I think this comes down to one of the main basic rules, universal rules, and that is that I don't believe that the Creator gives 2 rips as to whether you are Protestant or Buddhist or you're Methodist, Hindu, but doesn't matter what. The Creator could care less about your viewpoint or your beliefs. The Creator, these universal rules, are only going to care about why you believe what you believe. Are you a Methodist because your grandma was a Methodist and your parents were Methodists and you grew up in a Methodist church all your life? The same thing applies to being Buddhist or being Catholic or Islam. Any man-made religion you want to look at all, the same rule applies. Are you following those paths because it's what you grew up with and it's all you knew? Or are you following those paths because you examined all the paths and that you chose that the direction that you were going to follow was the right direction for you, at least, to follow? And I think that is the most important thing. It's not what we believe in, but it's why we believe in it. Because, I'm sorry, if you're just going to believe in being a Southern Baptist, because grandma and grandpa was, well, I'm sorry, but God doesn't have grandchildren. And that's what you're looking at in that aspect. You're assuming God's got grandchildren, and he doesn't. The relationship you have with the Creator is supposed to be personal. between you and the creator. And I think one of the things with a lot of these rules of the universe, universal rules that we can look at, and as far as seeing people who have not followed the correct path, would be even, for instance, people that are looked up to the most, like a lot of these TV evangelists. We've got multiple homes, multiple cars, multiple planes. Well, it seems like what they were doing was for worldly gain. Well, that doesn't fall under the universal rules. The universe doesn't abide by that. They're not going to automatically just be giving you personal gain. If you have extreme personal gain, it's only because you have sacrificed and given way above and beyond. When you look at these multiple homes, multiple cars, multiple planes, I don't really know how you could give above and beyond a lot of those worldly luxuries. I just don't even see it as being possible, because the things that you're going to gain from the universe, the things that are going to be positive in your life that you receive from the universe, are not necessarily 99% of the time going to be worldly pleasures. It's not going to happen. It's going to be things like being able to reach some of these milestones on your journey. Those are the personal gains that you'll get. But the personal gains you're going to get are not going to be the lotto numbers. I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way. There's things that you can do with, maybe a lot of these different things like tarot cards or whatever. Like I said, I'm not a fan of tarot, but there's things you can do with some of those. Maybe some will speak to you and resonate with you and be useful, and others won't. To me, tarot isn't. But as far as even like divining, I mean, I've seen huge freaking positive things come out of divining. But though, no, it's not going to give you the lotto numbers, and I'll tell you what, at the same time, what it will give you is things that you would have never expected. You'll get truths given to you that will kind of set you back on your butt for a while. And when a lot of people want to say that, a lot of these different things people experiment around with are witchcraft or whatever, and that they're only going to give you what you already have inside you. And I'm sorry, that is not true whatsoever, because they don't do that. Maybe the wicked ones will, if it's being used wickedly. Yeah, that's going to happen. But I think there's been a lot of things that have been afforded to people that even the church, I think it might be Canon 2016 from the canons, that is the main thing that freaking led everybody away from seeking any kind of extra spiritual help like that at all. Because who do you think even would have afforded a lot of these methods to humanity? It's not stuff they dreamed up on their own. It's all things that were created and established by the creator to start with. And I know, I'm not going to be probably invited to any Southern Baptist convention or anything like that, because the majority of people will totally kick against that kind of an idea. But this journey is all part of, really, number one, putting aside any preconceived thoughts or ideas or notions. All the things that you were taught all your life, all things of, whatever society you might be growing up in, or whatever kind of church you're growing up in, it's about putting all those things to the side, starting out with a 100% clean slate, and then looking at everything with new eyes and weighing it for what it really is, and seeing whether it's beneficial to you or not. Like I said, what we have to pay attention to the things that are going to keep us headed in the direction that our journey is on. Because if you get entangled or involved with anything that is not keeping you focused on that direction that you're looking for, then it's going to slow you down. It's going to be a stumbling block, or maybe even lead you off into some other path, some other wrong direction if you don't stay focused. But that's just some short and simple things I wanted to go over this evening, because there are universal rules. There are rules to this universe. Look at nature all around us. Nature understands them. They follow them. It affects nature. Many situations you can look at and point at.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point there in regards to the timeline of things, and that the first thing is where you're at, and the second thing is where you're going to end up. Because if we're really looking towards ascending to the kingdom of heaven, then we've got to look there first, and then we've got to employ the third part, which is in the name of Jesus. That's the pass through. That's what gives us passage. Otherwise, it's kind of like the commercial system presents. You're just a bunch of boats running around with nowhere to go, bumping into each other, causing all kinds of hazards.
Yeah. And we have to access the external system. I mean, trees talk to each other. They're connected underground. People connect. Things work. We have, by giving first, you're showing everyone that you have a heart and that you want to connect. It's all there. Our hearts, by the way, are powered externally, I think, electrically. So it's the energy fields have to be tapped into. It's all there. We just got to do it.
Yeah, John, we were talking about that several weeks ago about, the electricity in this electric universe, and the electric being something that, is what really runs our body. But though, if you ask any doctor, any cardiologist, where does that electrical spark come from in the heart that causes the heartbeat? Where's that electrical spark originate from? None of them can tell you. And I would say that it's very likely that it comes from the air around us. Even Tesla was starting to pinpoint that you could draw electricity just out of the air around you. And at the same time, I just kind of have to wonder a little bit, if you're putting a face diaper on, well, what is that going to do to that electrical spark that is in the air? Are you going to be absorbing that into your body? Or is that going to hinder it?
Yeah.
I'd definitely say it would hinder it.
Well, the magnetic field, Brian, can be detected 6 feet away of the human heart.
Yeah.
So they know it's external. But they're not going to tell you.
Oh, and electricity and magnetism are kissing cousins, in my viewpoint.
Yep.
They go hand in hand with each other. And I think that's, something that, to a degree, is a mystery to men today. But I don't think it should be. I think the honesty about that is out there. The truth about that is out there. But they've just kind of, pardon the pun, they've kind of harnessed that truth as well. Because if people knew it, then you might not need, Florida Power and Light, or, any of the other, California Bell or whoever, to supply you with your needs. And I think that'd be accessible to everybody. If you go back and look at some of the drawings and the architecture from buildings hundreds of years ago, it's like, wait a minute. I mean, even look at the pyramids. How did they get any light in there? In some of those old buildings, how were they lit? And a lot of people would say torches. Well, for the amount of time that a lot of these buildings or pyramids or whatever the case may be were used, if they were using torches, then you'd have a serious layer of soot in there on the ceilings. But they don't find that. Well, why aren't they finding that? I think these technologies were commonly known and used by people, and through the resets, it's gotten lost. And I am a strong believer that we're looking at another reset coming up here in probably another about 20 years. And the state knows that. The governments know it. The powers that be, they know that. That's what they're preparing for.
Yeah. Well, the sun reset in 2008, and that was scary with the sunspots. But the next one, I'm kind of scared. I don't know what's going to happen if there's a solar reset. That's what you mean.
Right. Well, and now when I talk about resets, we have to realize that as far as what we've seen in modern history, serious travel amongst nations didn't really occur until maybe the 16 or 1700s. And even that was a daunting task. I was referring to, like, sailing across oceans. It was difficult, took a lot of time. So there wasn't a lot of communication done. So when I look at these resets, I'm not looking at them as far as like a worldwide reset, that it happened everywhere on Earth, at the same time or within a short amount of time of each other. I think there were regional resets that affected maybe just one continent, but not the others, or maybe two continents and not the others. And so everything that they had was lost. And it took time for things to get reestablished again.
Yeah. Especially like China, they've always said that they invented things before Europe. Well, I don't know if that happened, because there could have been resets in China, resets in Europe at different times. I think that's what happened.
Well, how much real history and knowledge do people have, say, of that part of the world, of Asia?
That's what I mean.
It seems to me like they've always kind of had an invisible wall around them that they haven't really let out a lot of their info. They haven't intermingled with other people's. Yeah, I think a whole lot of knowledge has stayed tight-lipped within Asia.
Yeah, it's still like that today. They have their own internet. China does.
Yeah, it's still like that today. And even at the beginning of this little boogeyman situation that we've experienced the past couple of years, at the beginning of that, people were seeing videotapes of things happening with doctors over in that part of the world, and with raids on people's homes in that part of the world and things like that. But they didn't stop to think about it and realize, well, okay, we're getting all these videos right now, but how many other internet videos have you seen the past several years from that part of the world? Because they kept all that locked in. The only thing that gets out is what they allow to get out. Like you said, they have their own internet and everything. They don't have YouTube over there like we do, And even within different countries, say United States, look at United States and Mexico, for instance. They're connected, but there's things you can watch on Netflix in Mexico that you cannot watch in the United States, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that mankind has held on to greedily, which is probably the worst thing, and that is knowledge and information.
Yep. And if China's not connecting, that's a lesson for tonight's talk, is how we have to, to give and to connect. China chose not to, and look what happened to them. Last 2,000 years, they didn't end up too good. I mean, they're overpopulated, but just culturally and all that, and they have no freedom. They have no personal empowerment. It's polluted. It's just.
Well, they're overpopulated, but that's because they're all shoved into little corners of the country.
Yeah.
When there's so much of the country that's just wide open space and beautiful, but everybody has been kind of, I'll just say, mentally tricked into living in the big cities and being stacked in on top of each other.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, large parts of it are desert. So there is truth to that.
And there's people I even know here in the USA, friends or acquaintances rather, that talking to them and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're just way overpopulated." And I'm like, that's the talking point that you hear on TV. What are you talking about? overpopulated. You need to get in a car and freaking travel across the country, and take a look. The majority of, and there's a little fact that most people don't realize, is that the majority of the population of the United States of America all live in cities.
Yeah.
They all live
yeah.
in cities. Cities only make up 3% geographically. 3% of the United States of America are the cities, and that's where the majority of the population is at.
Yep. Or just around the city. Urban areas, whatever they call them, but it's all open space. I mean, farmlands, airports, colleges, golf courses. We've done pretty good at taking up space here.
97% of North America is pretty wide open and comfortable. So,
yeah.
Anyway, those are topics we could go on and on about probably, but
yeah.
But I think people first need to, really stop and consider the journey that they're on, the elements that are parts of being on this journey, realizing your starting point. You got to realize that if you want to know if you're making any progress or not, you have to have your goal, you got to have your ending point, and you've got to have your method or your mode of transport that you're using to get you to that goal. And remember all along the way that there are these universal rules that are going to affect you, whether positively or negatively, depending on how you use them. These universal rules of, if you want to receive, you've got to give abundantly. If you want to ascend or raise your frequency, whatever, you've got to let go of the pain and anger and learn how to forgive, not just others, but most importantly, yourself. And I think that would probably be a good wrap-up point there. I haven't looked at the chat. Keith, is there anything in the chat that needed to be identified or referenced?
Just Eve said to everyone earlier about the tax being a duty to one's king. And today we see that as serving our king in heaven by following Jesus Christ. And then she put down, Jesus said to Peter, then the children of the kingdom don't have to pay taxes. Because Peter self-incriminated and made a verbal obligation. Jesus knew Peter was under contract to pay the duty. So Jesus said, go ahead and pay. Jesus plainly said the children don't pay duty. The implication was that those under, consent. It's CONSTEMTUWL. It's not. I don't recognize that word at all. I can only assume that they screwed up the end of it and they meant consent.
Well, I think one of the most important aspects of that conversation that Yeshua had with Peter was Yeshua asked Peter, he said, who does the king tax? Does the king tax his inhabitants, or does he tax the foreigners?
The foreigners.
And Peter said he taxes the foreigners. So that should really make people stop and think, and if you're writing out your check in the spring, for your property taxes or paying tax on this or that, stop and think, who is it that really gets taxed? Because that's something that hasn't changed over time. It's still the foreigners that get taxed.
Yep.
And so, yes,
taxes if taxes are voluntary, then you're not the foreigner.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, guess we'll catch you all next Sunday night. Be prosperous. Realize you're on a journey. And, what was that doctor's name on, the name of that cartoon? It's a grown-up cartoon. I forget the name of it now. But it had the character Bender in it.
Oh, yeah.
But,
Adult Swim.
yeah. Well, that's one of the channels that carried it. But anyway, Bender had a conversation with the doctor that's down there, and the little bald-headed, scrawny guy, always in the lab coat, But and the doctor made a statement to Bender. He said, essentially, he was saying that, being immortal or having an immortal life is basically a worthless endeavor, if there is such a thing as mortality. It's something to kind of wrap your mind around.
It, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of something to wrap your mind around.
Yeah.
Well, guys, see you next Sunday night. Have a wonderful week. Bye, guys.
See you later. Yeah.